it returns true if any one field modified its value. If any one field modified its value, and then it is dirty. These are the form state services actually. Form state services, that means they can tell whether form is valid or invalid. Is form valid? Is form invalid? They can verify that. How do we capture this form state? How we can handle this form state is, to capture form state, you have to configure like this. We have a formic. In this formic, usually all the initial values and all you mention here in the formic already. Formic now uses a dynamic expression here. Previously, we were not using any dynamic. Previously, directly we designed a form inside. But now our form have to return a value. True, false, valid, invalid, it should return. So a dynamic, you can create a reference, some form. Form is a reference, and actually this form reference so returns form container. That means whatever returned by this form, it is stored in the reference of form. It is stored in this reference. And usually what this form component returns in formic, they designed in such a way that it can return valid, invalid, dirty. That means this form component can return a form state which indicates is form valid, is form invalid, is form modified. How it knows form is valid? If all fields in form passed the validation, then it is valid. If any one field failed, then it returns invalid. If any one field modified, then it will return dirty. And all are Boolean, true, true, false, they return. So that means whether the form modified or not, so all fields valid or not, you can capture using this reference form. So that means it uses form dot valid. So or like form dot invalid and like form dot dirty. All these options are defined. So for example, now we designed a form, and in this form I don't want this submit button to work if any one field have a issue. If any one field is having a problem, we don't want this submit to work. Then actually what we have to do is, this form is not returning currently anything. We have to make it return. So I will cut this form from here, and we will put a form reference, a binding expression first. We put a form reference, and this form have to return that complete form. It should return that form. So it must return this form. So that means this form returns all the services which you can access using this option. I just given valid, invalid, and dirty. There are so many others. There are so many others returned by this form state. Actually, you see now, I will try to handle that here. See, you just can write a binding. So that means you just write any binding expression to print the values. Roughly below that here, I am using form, and form have so many options. Form have errors, form have dirty. You see, these are all the form related methods. Is valid, so it is having touched, it is having values, is invalid. So many options are there. So many options are there. So it is having some important methods. Actually, others are not required because on submit we are using them. On submit we are collecting the values, initial values and all. Actually, what is happening here? Form is going to have the fields like dirty. It is having like what? Touched. So it is having like values. It is having like errors, which I already explained. Values means it returns all the form values which we are already using in submit. So errors means it will return the errors. Previously we already used it. Formic dot errors dot. So name error, which error it is, we already used. Dirty, touched or nothing but dirty means modified. Touched means it is nothing but blur. Touched is nothing but blur. That means you clicked inside and blur. Click outside. Click outside means it lost the focus. Means it is blur. So that is nothing but on blur it can perform certain functionality, which we already know. On blur, on change are the default options provided by them. So why we need these form state? So you see now actually here I am writing form dot. So like invalid. So form dot valid I am just using. Is valid, right? Is valid, is invalid we can use. If it is valid, then what happens? It will return a boolean true or false. That means it will return true or false. But you know that React will not show any true, false boolean values. You have to present them, right? We will implement this now. So how we can manage? So it is having all is valid, right? Is valid, is invalid like that. Okay. Invalid. Okay. Now you see now here how this can be used. Now what we have to do is this button we need to disable, and we need to enable if the form is valid. That means we need to add a property called disable. What is the logic for disable? We have to write an expression. What is the logic for disable? If form dot is valid, if form is valid, then disabled must be false, otherwise it should be true. Am I right? Disabled by default is true. If form is valid, you know in HTML every validation by default true, not false. every state in HTML is by default true. Every boolean state in HTML by default is true. It is not false. You return read only, you return disabled, you return checked, all are by default true. Right? You need to set it to what? False. If it is valid, means all fields are valid, then true. Otherwise, false. Now, disabled is false. Okay. Now you see here, we refresh. I click inside name and I click outside. That means it's not enabling submit button anymore. So that means you cannot submit if there are some errors. Now I am adding here vendor also required and I am entering some name. So it is short, it is still not available. I'm entering some price, right? So minimum 1000. I'm entering some contact 10. So plus 91. Okay. Still it is not available because we still have some error and we entered some value. Now it is fine. Submit is working. We can disable or enable any field. Suppose name is removed, then automatically submit will be disabled. Now, similarly, suppose if you want some button, for example, actually this name is having some values or something. You want to verify on editing. There is another button called save. Now, when this save button should work, so we have a button called save. This save button should work when any modification happened inside the form. Any modification happened in the form, then save should work. Or your wish, you can use any functionality. You want to hide. When a modification happened, it should display. Now tell me how you will hide. You can apply CSS classes now. You can apply CSS classes, right? So which CSS class we can apply? So we can apply display block, display inline, display none. You are using Bootstrap now. Otherwise, you can write style, inline style binding you learn. So what is the condition here? Class name. It depends on form. If form is dirty, if form is dirty means it is modified, then we have to apply a class D inline, display inline. Otherwise, we have to put D none, display none. That means now save button is not working. It's not there. You entered some details, now save is working fine. It is displayed. That means you start some typing. You know that these days, if a website gives a lengthy form, they save, they ask us to save till that point. So that next time you can restore from that particular location. So usually you might have seen a lot of lengthy forms like passport, visa and all these. They have so many fields to fill in several levels. Then you can come back next time and continue where you left. Right? Then what they do, they give an option of saving the form data up to that part. There is still more things to define. So we can handle all the form state by using this concept. You can use all your knowledge of style, class binding and handling it. Right? So this is an example of a form state, how to capture the form state. It's not mandatory, but you can manage this. If you know this, you can handle so many things actually. Suppose if I asked you, like, if form is invalid, the entire form color should be red. That means if form is invalid, entire form color should be red. Background should be red. If it is valid, then it should be green. Then you can apply the class binding techniques, right? That means for what we do for this form element, so we are using a class name. This is dynamically defined through form dot is valid. If form is valid, what should happen? So we should apply as bg success. bg success. So otherwise it should apply like bg danger, like that. That means it depends on what styles and effects you are using. And I click there, then it is red. You can put any colors. I just given this. Suppose I said warning. That means it will be in the warning state here. So it will be in war. So it depends. Whatever effects you want, you can call. So I already showed you the validation. If any one field is wrong, can you turn that field to red? Border red box. Of course, we can apply the style binding. Right, we can use that already I showed you in style binding, how we can make it appear red or green based on the input. This is all the validation that Formic have. Actually, this is not Formic validation. It is a combination of Formic and Yup. Formic is designing the form, Yup is validating. That means the validation is not related to Formic. Right? This is one library. That is the reason developers will go with some other libraries. Like there is another library. This I will just give a help you try. That means as a developer, you should have an habit of exploring anything by yourself. So because your companies will be using some rare libraries which you never heard. Sometimes they have their own libraries. Several MNCs have some own libraries because they build their libraries and they use those libraries. Then there is no chance that you can Google and search for them. Even Google also cannot show anything because that's privately designed for their reasons. So many customized libraries are used in companies. So there is no chance that anybody knows about them. Why they do like that? Because they want to prevent lot of security issues. Because a person who is using Formic, he knows all the loopholes in Formic, right? Of course, right? Even do you know some companies don't use the databases that you see regularly outside, like Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server. They don't use those databases. They have several customized databases. They use them. That's the reason you need to go through their documentations, explore and know about them. Because even Formic, what I showed you, they are up to today what they are having. In next few days, if they release a new version, it's not guaranteed that same will be there. That means after few days, this Formic may change. You need to keep updated yourself. You need to explore and know yourself. Keep in touch of these libraries. First, refer the libraries before using them. because lot of version compatibilities will come with React, because React is rapidly growing technology. In every year they are releasing 3-4 versions. So they slow down recently. Earlier every year 8-7 versions they used to release. Now they are little slow, 3-4 versions only they are releasing. That is the reason. The point is you need to check whether the library is also updated or not, because remember, lot of third-party libraries are not suitable for React 18, and currently you are using React 18. You have to make sure that before you use a library blindly, you cannot use without knowing what versions of React it supports. You have to check that. So another very popular among developers, we have Telerik forms, which is very popular in MNCs because they are huge service providers. Worldwide, huge service providers, we have Telerik actually. This is Telerik. These are the huge service providers, and even IBM, Microsoft, NASA, all these are the customers of Telerik. They officially customers of Telerik. That means all Microsoft technologies use Telerik as a third party. Technically, IBM, all these are using Telerik. That means it's a huge service, but it is not free. You can't try this. But here you can go through the documents and see what's the syntax, what's the services they provide. And we can try another one. So let's see. Another one is React hook form. Another library is React hook form. So this is another third party form library. Another third party form library, React hook form. Formic also same. Now why some developers show interest in this hook form? Because internally it have validation schemas also. It uses all HTML5 validations and manages. So you don't need a separate library for validations. It have both form as well as validations. Both it is having. It's not necessary because it depends. It depends because in some places it looks complex, which some developers don't like. Then they go with others. Right? Now, what is this? How this React hook form works? So let's see how it works. This is the official React hook form. This is the React official hook form. So that is the official React hook form library. This is the official React hook form. This is the hook form. And one of the main thing they claim here is easy to validate, because Formic is not great in this and they use the support of yep like library. So pre-format, format, and flexible, extensible, and this is the complete Formic related. They provide both for mobile based as well as web based. They have some features to explain, but it's not necessary that your company have to use this. Right? It depends. Formic forms they can use different. So usually, what happens is the process of Formic and hook form, syntactically everything is different. You need to set up separately. Let's run this and see. I will just give overview. You go through all the concept from the documentation. Documentation means you have to read its API. To learn about any library detailedly, a developer have to always check the API. Means in any library you are going to explore, you need to first know about the API. If you go through this API documentation, that is enough. You will get a complete idea of every feature they provide. So better as a developer, go to the API. Here they will provide all the concepts they have. And currently they are in the version 7. They may have older versions also. They have support for both TypeScript and JavaScript. Currently we are using JavaScript. Now let's see how to use it. How we can use this one. Simple example I will show you here. First, what we have to do, so we have to set up. So install hook form library. npm install react hook form and save. If you have any confusion in the command in their official site, you can get, or you can get it from a resource npmjs.com. That is the location where you can get the information about all the packages. Actually, better always have a look at this npm.js. Go there, search about this, you will get, because what is advantage of this is there they have a community which will address all the issues in it. That means the community will address all the issues. That means what problems it faces. All those dependencies, issues, detailedly you can understand that. Because majority of the websites, official websites, they don't mention the issues because communities have used them. They know in certain places there are problems, they report them and they put a solution for. So here you will find that. So because when you are implementing any library for different situations, every time it may not work, sometimes it may fail. Due to that, where it fails, when it fails, how to address that issue, what dependency you need extra, all such things they will mention here. You can go through that. So that's a good habit. So you can go with npmjs.com. Here we have React hook form and React hook form. This is React hook form. And when you go here and the React hook form, so you can see they will give you the code, dependencies, dependents, versions, all the issues also. And key point here is, so when you are reading this documentation, so you should know that this version is compatible with your React. And see, it's recently published 17 days ago. That means some changes happened. Few changes means these libraries frequently change. Some don't change. From 4-5 years they will be same. But these type of libraries regularly change actually. Okay, now we will see how this works. You have to set up this. Let's run this here. So we are opening the command prompt and we are installing npm install react hook form. React hook form. Okay. Now what this react hook form will do is actually, so it provides use form hook to configure a form element. Generally in formic we have use formic. In formic we have use formic, and here they have use form. But it's not necessary that all are same, right? Complete syntax will be different. Actually, what this use formic have? This use formic main concepts are use form main concepts is, suppose you have to import use form from which location? React hook form. From React hook form we have to import. You need to import from React hook form. And next point is here we need to configure constant. We have a form, we can just configure as deconstructor. In the destructuring technique, we define the details like it is having form name, it is handling handle submit, and it is having a form state. This form state is again an object which will have errors. It is going to have an errors. So use form. That's how you have to configure a form. That means what this use form hook is going to return. Use form hook is going to return form name and a submit functionality and form state. Form state have errors. Form state is having errors. So that is actually the hook form. That means form name is nothing but it is a reference name for a form element to access all its services. And handle submit you know already. So it configures actions on submit. And form state, it provides errors object that can handle both of them. That means input state validation, input state validation and form state validation. So that can handle input state validation. Form state validation is directly managed by form. So it can handle input state validation. Means the error in every field it can identify. So you have seen here the complete syntactical difference is there. That means the syntax of the form and here it is completely different. Now how this is going to work we will see actually. I'm giving only few of them, right? You go through the documentation, you can explore. It has a lot of other functions also, right? Lot of other events and functionalities it is having. Now let's set up, already it is there, right? Now let's see how do we create a form, means how we can define and use the form. So first thing is I will remove this formic part. I will add a new component. Yeah. So hook form. Okay. And here I will give hook form demo. Fine. So that is an JSX file. Hook form demo JSX. So we have simple export function and hook form demo. So it will return a simple container we have, like, yeah. Okay. Now in this, what happens is usually let's create a field data list, data term, some name, data definition, some input type is text. Let's just put this field and see how it works and make sure that we have a form. Rest of part you design, you add all the functions and elements whatever you need. Just I am showing you basic process because I need to leave it for you to explore, right? And you handle. Because remember, you cannot call yourself as a developer if you cannot explore libraries and learn. No use at all. Because it's not like everything you explain and we explain and you know about it, because it cannot happen in React like concept because it changes and you can't adapt to it if you don't have an habit of exploring them, right? You can't survive in React based technologies if you cannot explore libraries. It's not possible, right? So that's the reason you keep an habit of this. Now here, how do we use the hook form? So how do we configure? We have to, let me keep this in the startup. So in index, so hook form demo. Okay, that's fine. We have just this hook form here running. That's fine. Now what we need to do here is we will go and set up the hook, like import. You have to import. So use form from the React hook form library. Next, you need to configure. So constant. So you need form name. So register is the form name. And we have another one. What is it? Handle submit. Okay. You need another one. What is it? Form state. Form state is again an object which have what? Errors. So it should use form. Use form requires all these things. If you explore this use form, it is having so many functions. That means it has on blur, on change, on submit, on touch, right? And actually in their documentation you can explore about it. They given a clearly hook here, and use form is the hook, and you can see it will provide so many fields. That means all the properties, whatever it provides, and what is the purpose of those properties. So in various events, what are those events? What are the basic rules? Everything it will give you here. So it's going to manage all these things and handle. So this is just about only one option. So it is only about the one concept. Like that, they have use controller, use form context. They have few other hooks. Form state, use watch. These are available. You can go through them. Later, when you learn about some React hooks, then these others also you can easily handle. You can understand about. Okay, initially let's see how we can configure. Up to this fine, we configured it. Next, how you will bind with elements. That means now what should happen? So this element should have a name. What is that name? How you will bind that use form, right? Actually, earlier you saw in formic, the name is binded by using formic handle change or formic handle blur, or we learnt a spread syntax. Through that spread syntax, you can bind with a field so that it can access all the field related properties. Formic uses a spread syntax. Similarly, use form also same, hook form. Here, what you have to do is you need to configure a spread operator dot dot dot, and you have to access the register. Register is the reference of the form, and the form reference is asking for which field you want to handle this initial value. Like initial value is field name. What is the field name? Name. And it will have options. Options are nothing but, so this register field have name and they have option. Option is nothing but what are the restrictions for this you want. I want option like what required. So that means that is one option we have configured, and you see required. Okay, what is this required type? You can see this is required. So it is having required here. And another option, what it is having, so we have like min length, max length, like this. How much the min length, max length value should be? Suppose min length should be like 4. So what is this required? Required must be like true. That means a boolean we are configuring. You know, these are all actually HTML attributes. HTML have min length, max length, required. How to verify regular expression? To verify regular expression, you know, HTML have a pattern attribute. You can use pattern. You learned HTML have a pattern attribute. You can use all HTML services it uses, right? Just you have to use those HTML services there. So how do you bind that? So what we have to do, third step is bind use form. Bind use form with input elements to configure field and errors. So we have an input, type is text, name is some name, and we have so a register and the name and the validation attributes. We have to configure all the validation attributes. That's how we define. All the validation attributes you need to configure. So that is the validation options that you need to configure and define. Okay, now the next thing is how you will display these validation errors. How you will display these validations errors. How do you configure these errors? That means you have to access the errors and use the errors. So that means now how do we display the errors? So below here we have a data definition. So we have a class text danger, and here we want to display the errors. Where is that errors option available? You have an errors object. That means we are accessing here the errors object. This errors object is actually showing some root like option. That means it is having some root like option. What is this root option? Actually, this errors is nothing but form errors. This root is going to access the field values. That means it is going to access all the field related values. Errors is a field errors. It will get all the field values. You can go to definition. You see that is field errors. Its type is field errors. Okay, right click and go to definition. The field errors. The field errors actually it is using, you can observe here, it is using the field values. That means it is verifying what are the values you are entering, and based on that it is identifying the error. Now what you need to do is here, how do we display the errors? To display the errors, it's a complex approach little bit actually. Generally we need to show message and render a message. How do we render the messages? So what is the error? So generally you need to configure an expression. So in the errors, suppose the errors is error of which field name. What is the field name we have? The field name is what? Name field. And this name field have what is the error type we are expecting for name field. So you need an type. What is the type of that error you are expecting? Required. Am I right? Required. That means actually you need to verify that if the type is what required. If the type is required, you need to configure the errors in this. That means we need to access the error field name and the type, and if it is required. If it is required, what should happen? A message should display as required. How you will write then min length 4? You have to write another expression. That means you need to bind multiple expressions. Like it is required and its min length is 4, then it is valid. Otherwise it is invalid. It's little lengthy. Schema looks little better. You can just write a required, but everyone have their own issues. That means if you see the way how they validate, that looks complex. So developers may not show interest in such validation. That means, okay, you have built-in validation. It saves your library. It is fast. Why it is fast? Of course, they claim fast because you are not using any additional library for validation. If you are using two libraries, it will be slow. In one library, it is fast, but it is complex in handling all this validation. So how the validation error display? First, here I will give a point. What is it? Next option is access the errors from element and display in UI by using the form state error object. You have to use the form state error object actually. What is that form state error object is? The form state error object will verify what is the type. So based on the type, how you can manage all these things. So how do we configure this now? We need to access here in the expression. We need to access, what is it? Errors. Errors dot what? Field name. Field name. What is the field name here? So we will keep here errors. Yeah, errors dot field name. Field name is what? Name. Name. Actually, in this, it is using a TypeScript based library because they design all using TypeScript. Even I told you that React 18 is built with TypeScript in the background, all the library. So they use a question mark that's actually indicating that it is optional. That means these errors are not mandatory. That means this indicates, zero or one occurrence. Zero or one occurrence means if it is not there or if it is there, because these fields are configured as optional in their library. Actually, suppose you write like name dot type is equal to what it is required. If it is required, then what should happen? Question mark. We have to put a span. In that span, we should display a name required. Otherwise, we will put another span and there we will display what it is. So empty. That means we are not defining anything. We will just put empty. We are not configuring anything. Just we will keep empty. That's what we are doing. That is how we are configuring. We are configuring. It's empty. So that means now what you are doing is in this, you have to configure the fields and define them. And you see it says that type have some problem, undefined reading type. So errors, because it is what one? Now it is fine because they made this as what? Optional, right? So as I told you, you need to configure this because their TypeScript library, it mentions that it is an optional field. Field may be mandatory or optional. So you need to define this. Okay, now when the user clicks inside and is not typing anything, click outside, it is not showing any message. I am typing here, so and I am removing here, it is not displaying any message. So that means here this validation is not still completed. We have, because it you configured only one set of validation. You need all the validation to satisfy to define the fields. What is the second condition? Still it is invalid now. Why it is invalid? Because you mentioned two validations. What is another validation? So another validation is min length. So that means you need to satisfy this min length. How you will write for min length? That means how many validation services you have configured. For every validation service, you need to define the functionality. So that means you have to monitor like this. So here, so one point is every field validation is configured as optional in hook library. In so this is hook form library.
नहीं ये रुकती नहीं है ना, ये नहीं रुकती।
Library.
कहाँ जाना
So
है?
that is the reason. Hence,
हाँ तो
you
आगे रुकने
have
देना ना।
to define as optional field. Actually, you have to define as optional field. That means you need to keep errors dot field name question mark dot type is equal to the error validation type. Validation type so will be like this is validation type. So question mark, so span what you have to display, and colon span what you have to display. So what is the validation type here we are having? Validation type is nothing but is it like required and all. Is it like required or that? That means you need to configure whether it is required. It is defined with the options like another condition is that multiple conditions we have to define. So make sure that all validation services are configured with error messages. So multiple, you can configure multiple. That means you can use logical operators. One is AND, another one is OR. So to bind multiple expressions, you can do them. So here validation errors, we are not mentioning any blur submit handling. Currently we are using only one event. What is that event? Handle submit. Okay. And how do we add another expression here? So you need to add another expression, then you have to use an logical and. Am I right? And here we need to use another expression. What is it? Errors dot name. Name have the type is equal to what? Min length, right? Then question mark, what is the span? It says name to short, and colon, so you have another span, so that will render an empty. Just put an empty span here to display. How do we manage the submit now? How you handle the submit? That means what we have to do. So write on submit. What it has to do is handle submit. Handle submit requires a function. You see this handle submit automatically implicitly it is using on valid, which is defined in such a way that if the form is valid, then only it will submit. That's the reason even in formic also you have seen that values are not submitted until the form is valid, because internally they are using a form state to verify whether it is valid or not. On valid is not a general DOM function, it is just a function provided by this library, right? Now on handle submit have to use the function. Which function it should fire up? That means we will configure a function. So submit is equal to, it will collect the values, and these values we can configure. So JSON dot what string 5 and all the values in an alert we will keep it. Alert or log, anywhere you can do that. Now this submit should be used by handle submit. Handle submit should map to that function. Handle submit have to map to the function, then it can manage. So that means the approach is little different. So how they configure, how they define the functionalities, these will change. And remember, if you see Telerik form, it is complete different. It is complete different. The library is different, the hooks different, everything changes, right? So you can, even if it is a paid service, you can take a look on that, right? How it works. Here now I'm refreshing this and I'm entering submit name required. I'm entering some value. It says name too short. Now it is fine. This is a hook form. This is an hook form. Formic, hook form, all are similar. Only the point, if you want to write regular expression, you have to write a pattern. You want to verify min and max values, min and max. That means it uses all HTML5 validation. HTML5 validation. But still it is incomplete because for drop downs, radios, checkboxes, again you have to write custom. They don't have. There is no chance that a library have a validation for a drop down. No chance. There is no library in the world which will provide you a validation for radio, checkboxes and drop downs. So you have to manually configure and write them. So we will put this validation. This is an example. We will put this validation in one real in implementation, like designer registration, login form, submit data to servers. We will implement that. But I showed you two libraries. This is hook form demo dot what JSX. This is the hook form demo. You can try and you can explore all the other options in this hook form library, right? You have to go through all of them by yourself, right? You check them. Right? We will use any of these in our later designs. So we have learned all the concept of working with forms, how to work with the form and how to design the form. Now next, you learn data binding, style binding, class binding, event binding and forms. Now we have some more events like event handling. Like when you are dealing with events, some more technical things you should know, which is very often asked in interviews. That is like how you will handle debounce and how you will handle throttle, like concepts. In JavaScript, you have a concept of debounce. I hope you have learned. If you have learned debounce and throttling like concepts in JavaScript, you can implement them here. How they are implemented, we will see that, right? In JavaScript, what is debounce you learned? don't know, in JavaScript you have learned debounce concept. That means debounce can be controlled by using timeouts and intervals. Debounce is nothing but a function is executed immediately, we can delay its process. That you can do by using debounce. Right? That timer related concepts will be there in events. Then we can finish. That we will see in next session. Tomorrow we'll do that. In tomorrow's session, we will discuss about what is debounce, how this works. Every React entry you have question on it. What is debounce? What is throttle? Why should we use? How it works? Every interview, right? That's the reason you should know about them. Tomorrow we will see that. Tomorrow we'll continue. Okay. Right. You have the new classroom code? No. Then I will share the new classroom code. Right. The new classroom code because this is the new class code you need to check. And from tomorrow onwards, our notes will be uploaded into this code, into this. So you have to join this new classroom code. Don't log in with multiple entries because some people log in with multiple entries. Due to that, other people are blocked. Our admin will delete them permanently if you logged in multiple. And again, you can't ask that I can't join. Right? Our admin is going to delete all the multiple entries, even the first also. That's the reason you have to log in only once with one account only. Okay, so this is the new code, and we will upload all the notes and everything here. Okay, then tomorrow we'll continue.